Imagine this. You wake up in a world where every thought you have is not your own. Your beliefs, your convictions, the values that shape your every decision, all of them implanted, absorbed, inherited, and yet you feel certain they belong to you. You scroll through your phone, consuming headlines, opinions, and outrage. You nod in agreement at something a commentator says. You dismiss an opposing view without a second thought. Deep down, you feel like you understand the world, like you've chosen your stance after careful reasoning. But have you? Ask yourself this. When was the last time you had a truly original thought? Not a reaction, not a borrowed argument, not a belief conveniently aligning with your environment, but a thought born from your own raw, independent reasoning. Most people struggle to answer this question. We live in an age where access to information has never been greater, and yet, the ability to think critically has never been weaker. People claim to be free thinkers, yet they consume the same news sources, follow the same influencers, and adopt the same trendy ideologies without questioning them. They pride themselves on their opinions, unaware that their opinions were engineered for them. How can we call this thinking? If you had been born in another time, another country, another social class, would you believe the same things? Would your sense of morality, your views on politics, your personal identity remain unchanged? Of course not. Your beliefs are largely a product of your environment, shaped by invisible forces you never chose. And yet, you defend them as if they were absolute truths. Now here's the real question. If you're not the one shaping your thoughts, who is? Governments? Media corporations? Social movements? Algorithms designed to keep you engaged but never enlightened? The truth is unsettling. From the moment you are born, the world begins shaping your perception, feeding you a script you are expected to follow. It tells you who you are, what you should strive for, what is acceptable to think, and what is not. And most people never realize they are part of this grand illusion. They go through life mistaking borrowed ideas for original insight. They mistake emotional reactions for rational conclusions. They mistake conformity for intelligence. And worst of all, they never question it. But you are different. If you have made it this far, if something inside you is beginning to stir, then you are already on the edge of an awakening. But before we talk about breaking free, we must first understand why this happens in the first place. Because this is not just about ignorance. It is not just about laziness. It is something deeper, something psychological, something embedded into the very structure of human nature itself. Let's go there. Let's uncover why no one truly thinks for themselves. Imagine a child, no older than 5, staring up at the world with wide, unfiltered curiosity. They ask endless questions. Why is the sky blue? Where does the sun go at night? Why do people lie? Now imagine that same child 10 years later. The questions have stopped, not because they found all the answers, but because they were trained not to ask. This is where it begins. From birth, you are conditioned by parents, teachers, media, institutions, not to think, but to obey, not to question, but to accept, not to seek truth, but to adopt the approved version of it. By the time you reach adulthood, you do not even realize this process has happened. You feel independent. You feel informed. You feel like your thoughts belong to you. But they don't. Carl Jung called this the collective unconscious, a vast, invisible structure of inherited beliefs, archetypes, and conditioning that shape our thoughts before we even form them. You do not simply learn ideas, you inherit them. They are passed down like genetic code, shaping your worldview before you ever have the chance to question it. And this is where the real problem begins. The mind's natural tendency toward conformity. Humans are not wired for independent thought. The brain evolved for survival, not truth. It seeks safety in numbers, harmony over logic. To belong is to survive. To think differently is to risk exile. This is why conformity is so deeply embedded into human psychology. The Asch conformity experiments in the 1950s proved this chilling reality. A group of participants was shown a series of lines and asked to determine which one was the longest. The answer was obvious. But when actors in the group deliberately chose the wrong answer, most participants agreed with them, even though their own eyes told them otherwise. Why? Because the pain of social rejection is greater than the pain of being wrong. Now apply this to every major belief system, every social movement, every cultural norm. How many people believe things simply because it is easier than standing alone? The death of critical thinking. The moment a society stops questioning, it stops thinking. Nietzsche warned of the herd mentality, the tendency of people to follow the masses blindly, mistaking collective belief for truth. He argued that most individuals never develop true autonomy. Instead, they absorb the prevailing moral, political, and philosophical narratives without examination. The result? People mistake memorization for intelligence. They confuse repetition with knowledge. They regurgitate opinions as if they were conclusions. They think they are thinking, but they are merely repeating. And those who dare to challenge this, they are labeled as dangerous, rebellious, or insane. The role of cognitive biases, the invisible chains. If you believe you are immune to this, you are already trapped. The brain is not an objective machine. It is riddled with cognitive biases, mental shortcuts, designed to protect the ego, not discover truth. Here are just a few of the most dangerous ones. The bandwagon effect. The tendency to believe something simply because others do. If everyone agrees, it must be true, right? Confirmation bias. The tendency to seek out and believe only information that supports your pre-existing views. I don't want to be wrong, so I'll only look for proof that I'm right. Authority bias. The tendency to believe something simply because an authority figure said it. A scientist, politician, or celebrity said it, so it must be true. Groupthink. The suppression of independent thought in order to maintain harmony within a group. If I question this, I'll be excluded, so I'll stay silent. Now ask yourself, how many of your beliefs exist because of these invisible chains? The manufactured reality. Who controls what you think? Most people will go their entire lives never questioning where their beliefs come from. But if you are not in control of your thoughts, then who is? The answer is unsettling. Governments, corporations, media, educational institutions, religious authorities, all of them shape your perception of reality. Not always maliciously, but always deliberately. Edward Bernays, the father of propaganda, once wrote, "The conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country." Think about that. Not through force, not through coercion, but through perception management. How does it work? The media decides what stories matter and what gets ignored. Corporations use marketing psychology to control your desires. Political leaders frame reality in ways that serve their agenda. Algorithms feed you information designed to keep you engaged, but never enlightened. And here's the most terrifying part. Most people never notice. They believe what they see on the news is the full picture. They believe their social media feeds are showing them reality. They believe their opinions are their own, not realizing they were carefully manufactured. So, what does this mean? It means that the very act of thinking, real independent thinking, is a revolutionary act. And if you want to escape this invisible prison, you must first accept one brutal truth. Everything you believe has been shaped by forces outside of your control. But here's the good news. Once you see the strings, you can begin to cut them. And that is where we must go next. How do you wake up? How do you break free from the illusion? How do you begin to think for yourself? The answers are coming. Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that the world you live in is not what you thought. Not because reality itself has changed, but because your perception of it has. Suddenly you see things differently. You recognize the patterns, the scripts, the mechanisms of control that shape society. You watch as people regurgitate opinions they did not form, defend ideas they never questioned, and live lives they never consciously chose. And then it hits you. If no one truly thinks for themselves, what kind of world does that create? The consequences are everywhere, personal, societal, existential, but most people never notice them until now. 1. A world of manufactured outrage. Walk into any public space, scroll through any newsfeed, and you'll see it. Outrage. People are angry, furious even. But step back for a moment. Ask yourself, where does this rage come from? Did each person arrive at their indignation independently? Did they reflect, analyze, and form a reasoned position? Or were they led into it, nudged, provoked, manipulated? The answer is disturbing. Media, corporations, and political entities monetize your emotions. They do not want you thinking critically. They want you reacting instinctively. Fear, anger, tribal loyalty. These are tools of control. When people do not think for themselves, they become easy to direct, divide, and conquer. Make people hate each other so they never challenge the system. Control through fear. If people are afraid, they will cling to authority for security. Keep them distracted. Flood them with endless, superficial controversies so they never ask deeper questions. Most outrage is not real. It is manufactured, and the more people react without thinking, the less they control their own lives. 2. The death of true debate. Real thinking requires debate, open, challenging, uncomfortable conversations where different perspectives collide. But in a world where no one thinks for themselves, debate does not exist. What takes its place? Echo chambers. People surround themselves with voices that reinforce their existing views. Social media algorithms ensure that you only see information that aligns with what you already believe. Schools and workplaces discourage dissent, favoring social harmony over intellectual rigor. The result? People do not debate. They argue. They do not question. They attack. They do not seek truth. They seek validation. If you are surrounded by people who always agree with you, you are not thinking. You are being conditioned, and yet those trapped in these echo chambers believe they are free thinkers. That is the final layer of the illusion. Not only do people fail to think for themselves, they believe they already are. 3. The rise of mass conformity. Have you ever noticed how quickly new ideas take over? Yesterday, an opinion was radical. Today, it is mainstream. Tomorrow, disagreeing with it will make you an outcast. This is not progress. It is mass conformity in action. When no one thinks for themselves, beliefs spread like viruses. People adopt them, not because they are true, but because they are safe, because agreement is rewarded, because questioning is punished. This is why ideological shifts in history have often been sudden, aggressive, and unquestioned. People do not stop to ask, is this true? What are the consequences of this belief? Who benefits from me thinking this way? They simply go along. And if you dare to resist, if you ask the wrong questions, you are labeled radical, dangerous, problematic. Because in a world where no one thinks for themselves, independent thought is a threat. 4. The slow erasure of the individual now. Step back. Look at the big picture. When no one thinks for themselves, what happens to the individual? They disappear. They become just another predictable unit, a consumer, a worker, a voter, a believer in the dominant narrative. Their life is not their own. It is a reflection of whatever external forces have shaped them. This is why so many people feel lost, even when they are successful. They have followed the script perfectly. Good education, good job, good social standing. Yet something feels missing. That missing feeling? It is the self. A life without independent thought is not a life. It is a performance. And the final, most tragic consequence? Most people will never realize this has happened to them. 5. The point of no return. There comes a moment in life, a rare, terrifying moment, when you see through the illusion. You recognize that most of what you believe was given to you. You see the forces shaping public perception. You realize that real thought is rare and dangerous, and at that moment, you face a choice. Do you go back to sleep? Ignore the truth, blend back into the crowd, live a comfortable, unexamined life? Or do you do something far more difficult, far more terrifying? Do you break free? Because if you do, if you decide to think for yourself, truly think, everything changes. Your relationships will shift. Your perception of reality will fracture. You will begin to see things that others cannot. And once you step onto that path, there is no turning back. But here's the real question. Is that a price you are willing to pay? Because most people are not. Most people would rather be wrong in a crowd than right alone. Most people would rather feel safe than be free. Most people would rather obey than think. And that is why so few ever escape. But if you are still here, still reading, still questioning, maybe, just maybe, you are different. Maybe you are ready to rebel, but how? How do you break free from the chains of inherited thought? How do you reclaim your mind from the forces that have shaped it? The answer is coming. The rebellion begins now. At the edge of a vast, uncharted wilderness. Behind you is everything you've ever known. Your beliefs, your identity, the comfortable illusion that you've always been in control of your thoughts. Ahead of you is something terrifying. Freedom, true freedom. Not the kind sold to you by governments or corporations, not the illusion of choice presented in consumer culture, but real, unfiltered freedom, the kind that forces you to take full responsibility for your own mind. This is where the rebellion begins. If you have made it this far, something inside you is already changing. You are beginning to see the strings. You are beginning to question the narratives you once accepted without hesitation. And now, the only question left is, how do you escape? Here is the answer. 1. Kill the illusion of certainty. Most people cling to their beliefs, not because they are true, but because they are comfortable. Certainty is safe. It allows people to move through life without questioning, without doubt, without the terror of realizing that they might be wrong. If you want to think for yourself, you must destroy this illusion. Ask yourself, what if everything I believe is a lie? What if my deepest convictions are nothing more than societal programming? What if I have been defending ideas I never truly examined? Sit with those questions. Let them unsettle you, because the path to truth begins with radical self-doubt. The more certain you are, the more likely it is that you have stopped thinking. 2. Starve the system that feeds you lies. You cannot free your mind while still consuming the very things that keep you trapped. Look at the information you absorb every day. News, social media, entertainment, conversations. Are these sources expanding your thinking, or are they reinforcing pre-approved narratives? Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most of what you consume is designed to control you. The news is not about informing you. It is about shaping your perception. Social media is not about connecting you. It is about feeding you the next profitable outrage. Education is not about teaching you how to think. It is about teaching you what to think. So what do? Cut the cord. Stop blindly trusting mainstream news. Seek out alternative perspectives, even ones that challenge you. Reduce your time on social media. The less you scroll, the more you think. Question every authority figure, not out of cynicism, but out of a commitment to truth. Because if you keep consuming what the system feeds you, you will remain what the system wants you to be. 3. Rebuild your mind from scratch. Once you have stripped away the illusions, you are left with an empty space, a terrifying void. This is where most people fail. They break free from one ideology, only to replace it with another. They reject one political party, only to adopt the other. They abandon one belief system, only to latch onto a new one without question. This is not freedom. This is just another form of obedience. The real rebellion begins when you refuse to outsource your thinking to anyone. And that means you must build your own philosophy. Instead of inheriting morality, define what you truly believe to be right and wrong. Instead of following a movement, ask yourself what values actually matter to you. Instead of absorbing information passively, actively seek out contradictions. Look for evidence that challenges your assumptions. This is hard, this is lonely, but this is what true thinking requires. 4. Learn to love the pain of thinking. Real thought is not easy. It is not fun. It is not something you do casually while scrolling through your phone. Real thought is warfare. It is forcing your mind to confront contradictions. It is resisting the urge to agree just to belong. It is embracing the discomfort of uncertainty and ambiguity. This is why so few people do it. Thinking is painful. It forces you to dismantle the illusions that made life simple. It forces you to hold opposing ideas in your head without collapsing into easy conclusions. Most people avoid this pain by clinging to dogma. You must do the opposite. You must train your mind like a muscle, exercising it through discomfort, stretching it beyond its limits, forcing it to engage with difficult, inconvenient, and even disturbing ideas. Because only those willing to endure the pain of thinking can ever be truly free. 5. Accept that you will be alone. Here is the final and most brutal truth. If you truly think for yourself, you will not fit in. Society is not built for independent thinkers. It rewards obedience, conformity, and tribal allegiance. Those who break free are often seen as threats, not because they are wrong, but because they refuse to submit. And so, you must be prepared. People will misunderstand you. People will resent you. People will try to pull you back into the illusion. But that is the price of true freedom, because once you wake up, you can never go back to sleep. 6. The final step. Action. Most people stop at awareness. They realize the problem, they see the illusion, they understand the system, but they do nothing. They return to their routines. They continue playing their roles. They remain trapped, knowing they are trapped. That cannot be you. Once you begin to think for yourself, you must live it. Speak your mind, even when your voice shakes. Walk away from any ideology, institution, or belief that demands blind obedience. Make decisions based on truth, not on what is easiest or safest. Because in the end, thinking for yourself is not just about what happens in your mind. It is about how you live. And that is where the ultimate realization awaits. Because once you break free, once you escape the system, once you truly reclaim your own mind, what comes next? The answer is more profound and more terrifying than you think. Imagine standing on the other side of the illusion. You have stripped away the conditioning, questioned every belief, and torn down the false structures that once dictated your reality. You are free, but now a deeper question emerges, one that shakes you to your core. Now that you have no master, no script, no imposed beliefs, what do you do with this freedom? Because here is the terrifying truth about independent thought. It does not give you answers. It only removes the lies. 1. The void of true freedom. Most people imagine freedom as a destination, an arrival point where everything suddenly makes sense. But real freedom is not a place. It is an abyss. Once you have rejected the beliefs imposed on you, you do not suddenly receive new ones. You are left with nothing. No prepackaged purpose, no societal blueprint for success, no comforting group to affirm that you are one of them. And most people, when they reach this point, panic. They rush to fill the void, grasping onto the next ideology, the next movement, the next certainty to escape the unbearable weight of not knowing. This is why so many self-proclaimed free thinkers fall right back into another system of control. They become trapped in alternative dogmas, convinced they have awakened, when in reality, they have just traded one master for another. The hardest thing in the world is to remain in the void, to resist the urge to replace one illusion with another. But if you can endure the emptiness, something incredible happens. 2. The birth of your own philosophy. For the first time in your life, you have the power to create meaning rather than inherit it. You get to decide what is true, what is valuable, what is worth living for. This is the burden and the gift of real freedom. No one is coming to save you. No external authority can tell you how to live. No sacred text or political ideology can substitute for your own judgment. You must build your own path. This is what Nietzsche meant when he spoke of the Übermensch, the individual who transcends inherited morality, who creates their own values instead of blindly following those imposed by society. The weak seek direction, the strong create it, and now that responsibility is yours. 3. The cost of thinking for yourself. If you choose this path, you must understand something. Society does not reward independent minds. It fears them. You will be misunderstood. You will be questioned. You will feel isolated, because the world does not like those who refuse to obey. Most people are not interested in truth. They are interested in comfort. And a true independent thinker disrupts that comfort. You are a reminder that they too could think for themselves, but they choose not to. And so, you will face a resistance. People will try to pull you back into the illusion. They will accuse you of being arrogant, contrarian, or lost. They will resent the fact that you see things they do not. This is the price of liberation. But once you know the truth, once you have broken free, once you have reclaimed your own mind, can you ever go back? The final, most powerful realization. At the end of it all, after the questioning, the unlearning, the rebuilding, you arrive at the ultimate truth. No one has power over your mind unless you give it to them. Not your government, not your culture, not your religion, your family, your friends, or your past. Only you decide what is real. Only you decide what is worth believing. Only you decide what kind of life you will build. This is what terrifies those who still live within the illusion. Because it means there are no excuses. No one else is responsible for your ignorance. No one else is responsible for your failures. No one else is responsible for the life you choose to live. You are. And while that is terrifying, it is also the most powerful realization a human being can have. Because it means that for the first time in your life, you are truly in control. 5. The choice that defines everything. Now you stand at the crossroads. You have two choices. 1. You can return to the illusion. You can pretend you never saw the truth. You can slip back into old routines, adopt comfortable beliefs, and live as most people do, blindly, obediently, safely. Or 2. You can embrace your freedom. You can walk the difficult road of independent thought. You can take full responsibility for your mind. You can choose your own path, alone, uncertain, but fully awake. The choice is yours. But understand this: once you see the truth, you can never unsee it. You will always know the illusion is there. You will always recognize when people are repeating thoughts that are not their own. You will always feel the weight of knowledge, the burden of awareness. And that is why so few ever escape. Because freedom is not just about thinking for yourself. It is about having the courage to live differently because of it. So now, here you are. You know the truth. You understand the illusion. You see the strings. The only question left is, what will you do with this knowledge? Most people will forget. They will return to their routines. They will let the world think for them, as it always has. But some, a rare few, will take the harder path. They will break the chains. They will reject the false narratives. They will create their own meaning rather than inherit it. And they will truly, finally, be free. Which one will you be? The answer is not in your words. It is in what you do next. Most people spend their lives trapped in borrowed thoughts. You have the chance to escape. Not just to wake up, but to stay awake. Not just to question, but to create. Not just to think, but to live fully, fearlessly, freely. Because the world does not belong to those who follow. It belongs to those who dare to think for themselves.